What's up, everybody? Welcome back. My name's Kyle, and today we're talking about a pretty important topic. You've probably already read the title down below, so you probably already know what it's about. But I think when a lot of people learn R programming, or even Python or SAS or anything else, they want to jump right in with like, okay, well, the first step is how I load data, so I guess I start with that, and then maybe they start installing random packages, and then they do stuff with that data, and they get their homework assignments done and things. And then they get into a job, and that job requires them to use R. And then they publish things with R. And none of that really speaks to cybersecurity, handling data, principles of protecting data. All of that is very rushed, I think, when you originally learn R, in like at least an academic environment where I think a lot of people learn R and pick up R. So today I wanted to talk about just kind of like, let's go back to basics, and let's think more about how we're working with our data in R, and what are some of the tools that we can use in R to help ourselves and to help the company. Because if you think about it, everything that we do in R and publish, let's say, either from an academic sense or a corporate sense or even like a nonprofit sense, that's all intellectual property that's owned by somebody. And sometimes when we're using data, it's PII, so it's like personally identifiable or something like that. And so that's not good if that information gets out to everybody. There's massive lawsuits. I mean, you need to look no farther than recent news to see that. And I know that this video won't be dated by me referencing recent news, because there is always news of somebody leaking something or getting ransomware attacks, and it's just an awful, awful world out there. So I thought I would run through top 5 tips, because everything comes in 5. There's probably like 6 or something, I don't know. But we're going to go through 5 tips today of just R-based things that we can do to protect our data. And know that at the end of the day, this is a constant improvement kind of thing. You should always be running by ideas with teammates and working with others, and watching your email, report phishing, scams, and Outlook, and all the other stuff plays a part here. But these are just tips and tricks, tools that you can use in R to secure your data. So yeah, let's get started. And I'm just going to speak freely about this, and we're not going to hop into R or anything. I'll pull up images as needed, and we can view the data that way. Or not view the data. That would be the worst tip. Tip number 1, view all of my personal information. No, so yeah, we're just going to look at the code here on screen through images instead of me going through and running it and kind of like showing it live, I guess. But I got the 5 tips pulled up here. If you want to skip around, or if you already kind of know something, feel free to go into the description below to do the different timestamps, or just look at the bar down below and it should pop up a thing that allows you to skip between these. But hopping into number 1, you should see on screen right now that I'm trying to connect to a Snowflake server. And I'm doing the Snowflake driver to do this. And you see that my server name is XYZ. It's a great server name. And what I'm doing for my user ID, so we never want to share our user ID and password. So tip number 1 is all about protecting your username. Tip number 2 will be about protecting your password. So spoiler alert. But tip number 1, protecting your username. Now, we don't want our username thrown across the internet, and we don't want it shared publicly amongst even like colleagues in a business. Nobody needs to know what your username, unless they're like a tech professional or a close colleague for some business case reason. Your username is your username, and that's how you access your computer. It's your personal identifier, and it shouldn't be shared with anybody, and it doesn't need to be in your code anywhere. So how do we do this? How can we automate our username? Well, here's one little cool tip that you can do. If you call your system information through the sys.info with parentheses, and then follow it up with double brackets and put in a comment length 1 character variable called user, and that will pull in your username from your computer, which in many situations, if you're using a company work computer, is probably your username, okay? But if you're using an email as your username, for example, And then that's what you see below. So to connect to a Snowflake database, you usually have to have an email. And so what I did there was I pasted in my username, not my username, but the system username with @email.com or whatever. And then you separate it with nothing because you want it to be all attached. And that way, you never type in your username. And also, this is more reproducible code because if you shared it with somebody else, it would probably work for them too, right? So that way, you're not typing in your username anywhere, right? So I think that that's really cool. Tip number 2 is we're going to be talking about password. Now, passwords are obviously sensitive. We've been taught that from, ever since the early days of having a Club Penguin account or whatever you guys had. I don't know, Neopets, wherever you kids grew up on. So with our password, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to use the RStudio API. And so what an RStudio API will do is it'll open up a box that you'll see the image right over here. It will open up a box, and the description of that box will be whatever you paste in the character below. But this API will allow you to type in one time only your password. That password isn't saved as an environment object. Please, for the love of God, don't do this. Don't type into your R code what your password is so you can read it on screen. So, all right, let's just go over the security risks of this, if it isn't obvious enough. You could have somebody walking by that sees your password. You could have your password uploaded to GitHub without you remembering that it's on there. When you have to backspace it and type it in every time. I mean, trust me that this is a better way to do it. It's in the log files. It's as an environment object in R. I mean, just don't save your password as a password. And if you do, don't call the object a password and then put an arrow and type in your password. This is the way you do it in R. You use RStudio API. It'll open a box. You type it in one time. Yes, it's annoying. Every time you log into your database, you're going to have to type in your password. But that's so much better than the cost of somebody being able to access a database they don't have access to through your username, which we covered in topic number 1, and your password, which is now covered in topic number 2. So topic number 3. I hope those two were clear enough. Those are like the big ones. If you get those right, if you get your username and password covered, you're okay for like 80% of cybersecurity risk. But we go above and beyond. We're not only protecting ourselves, but we're teaching these tips to other people to keep the whole company safe, right? Because it only takes one weak link for everything to fall down and for somebody to have access to a bunch of data that they don't need access to. It's going to affect stock prices. Have I sold this enough? I feel like I've sold it enough. So tip number 3, watch out what you install for packages in R. So in R, if you don't know, you use install.packages and then a character variable to identify that package, and it somehow magically installs. Well, let's demystify that a little bit. What it does is it will shoot through the CRAN mirror and basically identify a repository online to link up with what you typed in as a character. Say you want to download Tidyverse. It'll find Tidyverse and then it'll install the folder there called Tidyverse. And you can go through a CRAN repository and scroll through all the packages that are there. But very rarely do we think that, well, we're just downloading things from the internet at the end of the day. And so we should take that a little bit seriously and kind of watch out what we install. So here's what we don't do in R. We double check that we're downloading it from a safe, reputable source. So just because it's GitHub doesn't mean that it's, crystal clear to download. Do a little bit of digging. If you see names like Hadley Wickham flying around and they're legitimately Hadley Wickham, not some fake account or something, it's probably good to go. Or just trust your CRAN repository for the most part. But let's say you want to change your CRAN repository. There's a couple different ways to do this. One is we can go into our global options under, I think it's tools. Let me double check. Yep, under tools, I was right. Go to tools, I'm just double checking here, go to packages, and then right at the top you'll see whatever CRAN repository you have set by default. You should probably just pick one that's closest to your geographical area, be a little bit faster. Probably not noticeably faster, but that's one option. And then you can set up second repositories. So just in case it misses that install, it can check other secured areas. Some companies go farther than that. So I've used R at 2 different companies now, and some companies will be okay with you just going right to CRAN. But other companies require you to use their specific CRAN repository. And what you do in that instance is you either set up their specific one as a secondary CRAN repository by just typing in the it's like the URL of the CRAN repository, or you can set it as the primary one. And if neither of those are really working, here's some helpful code on screen to where you can go into your R profile settings in your like actual R install, and then be able to manually override what the CRAN repository is. So there's no doubt that you're installing it from a safe source, which is identified by your company. So just watch out what you download. Don't download, install.packages parentheses malware. It's probably a bad idea. Don't do this. Another thing that we can check out, and this is tip number 4, where we're going right through these. Tip number 4 is to watch out how you save your data. And, all the data objects and things that even the data file, our data files. You can encrypt these. There's some really, really cool packages. I'll have a link in the description below to a help page on this, but there's some really cool packages to where you can save your data as an encrypted object, and it'll spit out a key just for you, which is like a password to be able to log into that data in the future. So that's a really cool way to save your data if you have to use a flat file like a SAS file or like an Excel file, all those kind of like entry-level flat files. That's a really cool way to encrypt your data if you need. And so there's a couple good R packages that I'll link in the description to help you out with that. And so that's a really good way to protect your data. Now, you may not need to do that if you're saving your data or if you're working on a shared drive or like off of a secured SharePoint location or something similar to that, or just uploading and pulling from a data source. But if you are using files that may be communicated around, then feel free to encrypt them. Then you can share that access key with only the people that need to have access to it. There's a really cool package by Hadley that does this really well. Again, Hadley Wickham makes a package called Secure. And so that's a great package where it basically stores it in a repository, and then only those with the selected key can have access to that actual data. And so that's a great way to secure your data. So that way random people can't just find the file itself, right? So that's a very proactive tip because people using other platforms like SAS or even just like analyzing their data in Excel may not be using these things, but if we encrypt our flat files, it kind of leads by example in protecting our data. So the last tip number 5, is going to be file management. We never really think about this that much, but R produces a lot of files. There's, your R file. If you create like a Sweave or Knitter file through LaTeX, it'll spit out like 5 more files. You have your R data file, you have your R history file, and then God knows how many objects you decided to save in that folder. It makes a lot of files. And we want to protect all of those too. I mean, that's intellectual property by the corporation. It's work that you've done. You don't want to lose that. You don't want somebody, just deleting it or something else. So how do we save them? So one really good way to do that is to learn to use GitHub in R. And what we can do with GitHub is we can set up our own enterprise-based account if you're working for a company, or your personal account if you're just an independent researcher. And then we can upload our files and all of the associated documents that we want to just one GitHub repository. And so that way we can do the commits that we need, push them out, save them in one repository, and then whenever we need them, we can pull the latest version. We don't have to, assume that the version on our computer is safe. We don't really care about the version on our computer. Hackers can do whatever they want with it because we've encrypted most of it anyways. And then the next time we log in, there isn't going to be a little chunk of code that's going to do something malicious, or it isn't going to be updated or slightly skewed to harm you, because we're just pulling in the latest version that we uploaded from GitHub the last time we worked. So it's just really nice workflow, by the way. So hope those are really helpful tips for you. Let's go back through them one more time. So Protect your username. There's great automation to do that through the user system info. So you can just pull that right in. Type in your password one time only through an API. Great tool there. And then just watch out what you install on CRAN and set up a custom CRAN repository if you need to. And then encrypting the data that you do work with can help you and your team by leading by example to keep files protected on the internet. And then lastly, file management. Stored in GitHub, which is a pretty secure place if your company has an enterprise account. And then that basically has all of our bases covered. But that's of course not everything. Like I said in the beginning, you have to check out all of the phishing tutorials and take your onboarding seriously at a company. And yeah, just always be cyber conscious. Use a VPN when you're not in office, and you should be okay. So that's all I have for you today. These were 5 tips to secure your information and your data in R. I hope some of the screenshots and things floating around the screen were helpful. It's a little bit awkward recording this when I don't have the physical thing here, and so yeah, hope that all made sense and then worked out. So. All right, well, thanks, everybody. If you have any comments or updates, this stuff changes so frequently, and there's always advances. It's a cat and mouse game. So if you have anything, if this video kind of gets dated, feel free to put it in the comments below, and I'll pin the most relevant one, so that way somebody doesn't come along like 5 years from now and all of this information's inaccurate. That wouldn't be cybersecurity either, would it? So feel free to provide great updates below. And I'll be going through those, and we can kind of learn from each other and make our world a little bit of a safer place. So hope you found something that you learned today. Let me know below if you did, and I will see you guys later. Take care.